Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Let's officially call this meeting to order, 4:31. Welcome, everybody, and welcome our viewers on SCTV. Thank you, SCTV, for taping. Let's begin with public audience. Would anyone like to speak? Yeah, Diane.
On your agenda, I think is still on here, is what came before the Board of Selectmen about, with the idea of a transfer tax addition to be by town, not by regulation, but by popular decision. One of the reasons is, according to the proposal, is the public, their attention to the stewardship issue. There's a saying in
I can't hear you.
Marketing.
I can't hear you.
In marketing, or actually it comes from the church regulations about the monks that take a vow of silence, and it's called Know the Abbot's Mind. The mind of the public, if they hear we're even thinking about adding a conveyance tax on the transfer of title, you will turn the town feeling against more open space acquisition stewardship. This town, every time an important thing came up, they banded together and said, yes, we want it, we'll vote for it, we'll get behind it, we'll pay for it. To ask them now, to when they're moving or transferring their property, to pay again for the stewardship when it goes into a fund that they may not even want the particular property governed by somebody else, is politically, and I'm afraid it will turn the public against the whole concept of conservation and stewardship. So I would urge you to say, rather than we support investigating it, to at least add that there are reasons why this may not be prudent at this time.
Okay.
Because I can tell you, now part of it, as Helen knows, is my real estate background. And the real estate people are just absolutely dead set against one more thing that puts Simsbury against other towns when you're buying or selling a property. So I think politically it's really a bad move.
Okay. Diane, thank you. And when we get to this agenda item, I can give you just a little more context around why I put it on the agenda. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in public audience? Okay, great. Is there any proposed changes to the minutes from the January 2nd meeting?
I have one small one on line 98. There are white pines and beech trees, but they're B-E-E-C-H trees. I saw that too.
I have a comment to make, not a change per se.
Yeah.
I know Maria knows how I feel about minutes. We talked about it before. I've spent an awful lot of many hours reading minutes for this committee for very good reasons. And it's not often, but it's not, let me reverse that. It is often that you find incomplete minutes in a sense, and this was a good example in this minute. I just wanted to mention it. In the public audience, second, line 23, Anita Mealert spoke about the costs associated with the proposed open space master plan Ms. Mueller discussed the disposition of open space parcels. The next line, Diane Nash spoke against the disposition of open space parcels. I bring that up to say, in one sentence you mentioned, Ms. Mueller, she commented, but you didn't say what her opinion was. So you don't know, and you need that information. In the next line, yes, Diane spoke, and then you mentioned that she was against the disposition. Maybe it would have helped to have another, phrase in there to explain why. I'm just giving that as an example. I just think it's important for us to have minutes that would help support the work and the kind of work that we try to do. I think minutes in any instance should reflect enough information so that those who need to look at those minutes, or those of us who should go and reflect on those minutes or look at those minutes, really have enough information to make it worthwhile. So that's just my editorial comment. I think they're important, and I think we do short shrift on them, I'm just hopeful that we can do better.
I was going to say, I noticed that also. I wasn't going to comment on it, but since you brought that up, I think I would propose that we amend the minutes to just say that Ms. Mueller discussed the disposition of open space parcels and suggested that it could have an unexpected negative effect. I think that was kind of the tenor of her comment.
Yeah.
But too often, someone like myself doesn't remember everything. So, I'm just saying, especially when time passes and you go back to really research, you need to have the minutes reflect more meaning.
Yeah, I'm supportive of that. I think the danger is when you go too far into what members of the public said, you run into them then coming back and saying, well, that's not exactly how I meant it.
There's always
so
a middle ground.
There's a middle ground. And I think that's what
Always a
you're
middle ground.
suggesting. Thanks, Helen. Are there any other proposed changes? Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes
Motion
with
to
those
adopt.
changes?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you. Item 3 is a discussion regarding the committee's role in open space stewardship. So this has been an issue that a number of members of this committee have brought to me in discussion on numerous occasions, and I really wanted to bring it to this group. And I think it would be helpful today to, for those members to lay out why they think it would be beneficial to have the stewardship of open space under the umbrella of this committee as opposed to the Conservation Committee where it currently is. And then, assuming if this group was supportive, we could talk about process after that. We would need to consult again with the town attorney. I imagine we would want to consult with the Conservation Commission, and I think it's likely a decision by the Board of Selectmen, but I wanted to start with this group to say, is this a responsibility that this committee wants and should have? So let me stop there and turn it over to any members of this committee who are sort of proposing this idea to talk about why you would favor it.
I will just say that I'm a proponent of this committee having that responsibility, and I speak from two perspectives. The first one being that I've been here forever, and since the beginning of this committee, and this is where everyone comes. Anytime that the open space subject, open space or preservation, whatever subject has ever come up, traditionally, historically, this is where the public comes to join in the conversation and to participate. And I think it's, yes, it's a tradition, it's historic. Having read all the statutory directions that give communities the opportunity to set it up in any one way or another, not just one way. I find that it is supportive of that. If you think of how we in this committee have conducted our business over the years, I think it's consistent. We should find no difficulty in identifying with what the statutes say. There was another point I was going to make. Now it slips my mind. I should have my notes with me. Maybe it'll come to me if someone else speaks. Go ahead, Nancy.
From the Conservation Commission point of view, we wrestled for many a meeting with the forest management plans. But what we really came to is there was really no policy or goals that were established prior to that. Stewardship is one thing, but the stewardship is just to carry out those goals. I don't think it's really the role of the Conservation Commission to come up with those goals. I think it would be better coming from this committee because we have representatives of all the different land groups. So I'd love to see the establishment of the policies and goals. The Conservation Commission, I think, would be happy to, to recommend stewardship policies once we have, or practices once we have that. But I think it really has to be determined here what policies for the town are. But I think it's up to the Conservation Commission to do that.
And my understanding is that's the charge of the work group,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
So.
No, I agree. I think it makes sense that you have a more varied group, if you will, here. So you have more stakeholders sitting and having that discussion. Again, from my Park and Rec, background, I'm going to be worried about, okay, how do we pay for a lot of the things that we want to do for stewardship? Whereas conservation may just be what's the best thing or use of the land. And so I think we have a more practical application when we have these different groups all here together so that each stakeholder has a chance to really kind of put their opinion in about what should be done. So I think it makes sense to have it here.
I agree with that, and something that I had told Eric previously is what we should do is this group would be kind of the overall group, but then we would seek an additional recommendation from, like you might bring something that's relevant to Parks and Rec, or you might bring something that's relevant to planning, so everyone here has kind of like a special extra role to play as the liaison to that commission.
Okay, please, Helen.
When this committee was set up, it was the first selectman as the chair, and then the chairs of the 3 land use commissions, and 1 person at large. And over the years, it was very understandable how the chairs of the land use commissions were really too busy to move into any other area of exploration rather than just the cursory responsibility that you carried from your committees to make this committee work. So that's why I had suggested a couple of years ago that when the charter revision was coming up, that we add 2 more members at large, because those 2 members bring more public input into this kind of committee and gives an opportunity to bridge into the public sector and to involve more people. But it also gives this committee a few more people who might have some time or some energy or some perspective to bring to a discussion, such as updating the existing program that we've been talking about. I just think that that is even more reason why this could be the committee and should be the committee that has the responsibility of stewardship.
So I'm hearing, I think, general support for this committee wanting to put stewardship under our umbrella. Maria, thoughts on next steps?
Sure. So I would agree with much of what's been said here. I think that there would be value in one group having ownership of open space from start to finish as opposed to piecemealing it out. I've also had some concerns just, with conservation also serving as the wetlands agency. They have a regulatory role that has a lot of duties and responsibilities that come with that, and just with that, along with the conservation duties, then adding open space management on top of that, I do get concerned that the open space management will get lost because your commission already has so many duties and
Actually, the
responsibilities.
Conservation Commission, the duties often get lost.
Yes.
In the regulatory
Right.
role.
Right. Right. So for those reasons, and I completely agree with what folks were saying about that. This group is such a nice, you've got so many stakeholders at the table, all who have, a role or, a concern with open space. So it's just, I think, a nice broad representation of the various interests regarding open space. So for those reasons, I do think it makes a lot of sense for this group to take that on. In terms of next steps, I mean, ultimately, the Board of Selectmen would need to essentially delegate that responsibility to this group. So I think we could certainly, if this group wanted to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that they consider tasking this group with it. I suspect if you were to submit that recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, they would want to do a referral to Conservation just to see how your group feels about it.
What was that last comment?
I suspect if Open Space made a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, that they would most likely just want to do a referral to Conservation to see how they feel about it.
Can we skip that step and just refer it to Conservation, or should the Board of Selectmen do that? I think the Board of-
Technically advisory to Board of
Yeah,
Selectmen,
fair
I
enough.
think you maybe send it
Fair enough.
to your group.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Does that make sense? Okay, yeah.
I know if we know we're going to land somewhere, why not do it, but I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So Maria, the letter that was written by the town attorney kind of says the opposite of what we're discussing here. So does the Board of Selectmen have the authority to, change the duties?
Yeah, so my understanding in reviewing this with Bob some time back is that the Board of Selectmen does have the ability to delegate the management of open space to another entity. Just that with the existing wording in the charter and statute, that in Bob's opinion, the delegation of that duty automatically falls to Conservation unless the Board of Selectmen delegates it to another entity. So again, I think that the board would have that ability to do that.
So we wouldn't have to be concerned with a charter revision or anything like that?
No. Last time I spoke with Bob, he didn't think that would be needed.
So would someone like to make the motion to refer this to the Board of Selectmen?
Do you want to recognize John?
Oh,
He has a question.
yeah, sure.
Can I just interject one thing? My latest reading of his letter, which I've read numerous times, and every time I read it, I get a different view of what's there. But this time it seemed as though the basis of Bob's decision was that Conservation was, I believe it's called the Forest Commission. There's a state law that had the town set that up. I would think that would need to be part of your motion, to make the Open Space Commission a Forestry Commission, or not?
I thought the Forest Commission, under the statute, I thought that language meant that it just gave another way for a town to give that power to somebody or some other group named the Forest Group,
Right. So I'm just saying, maybe the Board of Selectmen should name Open Space the Forest Committee too. Then that would make it clearer if somebody's reading the statute again.
I do remember that part of the letter. I thought all this language is kind of gray, like may do this and that sort of thing.
It would be in 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraph, last sentence of the one sentence.
Oh, there it is, yep. I see, okay.
Let me see if I have some.
One suggestion might be just, I think in spirit and principle, what I'm hearing from this group is that in terms of the land management piece and the management and stewardship of open space, that we would like the Board of Selectmen to task this group with that.
Yeah.
So I think if they wanted to pursue in that direction, I could simply consult with Bob, so at the time of the Board of Selectmen passing a motion, that if in fact we need to incorporate
Sure, I think
language
that's
around the
a good
Forest
way to do
Commission,
it.
we could just make sure that we did that at the board's level.
Okay.
I could make a note of that.
Okay, so would there be a motion to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that the Open Space Committee manage the stewardship of open space?
So moved?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Good. So item 4 is the state proposal that would allow towns to charge up to a 1% tax on the sale of property. This would be property, I believe, over $150,000. And that would allow towns to raise money for the acquisition and stewardship of open space. The Board of Selectmen at a couple meetings ago, expressed some interest in learning more about this proposal. We're going to be having a legislative update where we're going to be learning about a whole number of issues that could impact our town, and this is going to be one of them. I think it is way too early to even say whether I think that this has support among the Board of Selectmen, but just that we were interested in learning more. And that's where it stands. I included it in the packet, I think, mostly for informational purposes, but I did want to have some discussion because before the Board of Selectmen, I think, would take any action on it, it would be helpful to know if this group has a perspective on whether this is something we should aggressively pursue or not. And I don't think that's something we need to necessarily decide today, but I wanted to start that conversation.
I know that the Conservation Commission and the Simsbury Land Trust have written letters saying, essentially, why not put your name on the town? You may never use it on the list of towns that can use it. It really, our feeling was, it may not be the best way of doing it. It should be discussed, but we should have some discussion in town how we're going to support the stewardship of the lands that we have. And at the moment, we have no discussion going on about this, and we thought this might generate some discussion. This might not be the preferred way of doing it, but there needs to be discussion to go forward.
So, to one of your points, my understanding is an early version of this bill requires towns to sign on now. I've heard that requirement may have changed, which would allow towns to sign on at any point in the future, which would be nice.
That would be much better.
Maria, do you know what the status of that is? Otherwise, we could research that.
Right, that's my understanding as well. We have reached out to 2 resource people about this and potentially coming to an upcoming Board of Selectmen meeting to speak to that a little bit. One of my understandings with an earlier version of the bill I saw as well was that that the funds could also be used for the management of open space, and that in particular because we don't really have a strong line item in terms of dollars going towards management of open space. I thought, oh, that really piqued my interest, but it seems as if the version we're looking at now, that got lost.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that there's already been some changes to the language since it was presented to the legislature?
No, some of the earlier versions of what I saw.
Oh, you're talking about previous years?
Where, I saw an earlier version, I must say in the fall, where there was something circulating around this, where that the funds could be used for acquisition or management of open space, but it appears.
So that was, I
It's
went to
both.
the,
I think
I think
it's
it's for both.
either or.
I think
It's either
for
or.
both.
It's not apparent.
It's not in this
No,
document.
so I mean, these things are always changing, so I know when we wrote the
Right.
letters, it was like, it was both. But again, the letters were sent
And also
mainly
it
as
says-
a hope that we would have this discussion.
I went to the public hearing at the Capitol and I spoke at that, and it definitely was, people that spoke talked about both purposes. I mean, I think there's an interest in dealing with kind of progressive invasive species and problems like that you might not have a fund for. I think Simsbury's in a much better position than other towns because we kind of have on the books a fund that we can put that we voted to put money for open space. And I'm not sure what the language is governing that fund, if it's only for acquisitions or if that supposed $1 million fund per year also includes possible stewardship. So we might want to look into that, and that could be, you know, already a repository that we could take advantage of logistically.
Which repository, which $1 million fund?
Didn't we vote a long time ago that we would put money every year towards open space?
Who?
The town.
I don't remember that, I'm just asking.
I've talked to Anita about it a bunch of times. Does anyone else have any?
That they actually
He's nodding.
voted to...
Nodding yes or no?
Yes.
I think so.
Give it to me straight. In other words, how did that fall? In other words, the town voted yes to put money into the budget yearly? Is that what you're saying?
Basically voted to, I'm not sure if it was the entire town or the Board of Selectmen, or there's some kind of an open space fund that's never actually been funded. Do you remember anything about this?
Okay.
Sounds like a great idea.
Okay, maybe.
It's not the
Fee in lieu of?
subdivision, it's
Not
not
the
that,
fee in
it's
lieu
not
of?
that, it's a separate thing. But that is also another possible mechanism for this type of thing that we're talking about.
Well, can I ask Maria here.
There's
a
no money in
direct
that account
question.
either.
Well, I
Actually, the account doesn't exist. So in the event that we do receive funds, fee in lieu of open space dedication, we better have a place to put
You can
the
put it
check.
in this fund, the fund exists. It's in our charter, it exists, but it's never been funded by the Board of Finance. The issue is that the Board of Finance has that capability. They are in charge of what kind of monies or how monies are set up in different kinds of accounts. And they've always said no, they would rather deal with it differently, which they have. Historically, this town has really come to the table and voted in and raised the money when we had land that was valuable and needed to be acquired or saved by any other means. I know that capability, but the discussion has never really taken root here. So I'm going about funding that fund. So I'm going to ask Maria, has that discussion come up in this year's budgetary? There was no opportunity, there was no discussion as to we should put a line item every year to put some money in for stewardship.
No.
I'm not so much worried about getting money from the public, about conserving land, finding the money and the way to we've had help from the Trust for Public Land so many times already. So I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the fact that we have found ourselves in this pickle with this master plan situation because the town has never funded the fund for stewardship.
You may want to investigate, remember when Ryan Farm was being sold, and it came up with the Finance Committee that the way to fund this line item was to sell parcels of open space. And then we all went berserk,
Right.
as we should, because we said preserve it, and now they're talking about, well, these are useless pieces, so we're gonna sell them off. So the line item is still there, but it's not been.
The line item is still there.
The idea of having
A line
a
item.
standing fund
Yeah.
is still there.
So my understanding is that there is a fund that's created that's currently empty. Okay.
Doesn't help much, but it's nice to know
No.
it's there.
It's
There
like,
is a fund that's happening?
It's empty.
Empty.
it's empty.
Oh, empty. I thought you said it was happening.
So what I was going to suggest, I think that it's one thing to acquire a piece of property, but it's also important to maintain it in a responsible way. And I don't want to assume, but I think that it's easy to get behind that concept. I think where there could be reasonable disagreement is what's the best way to come up with a reliable funding stream. The proposal that we have in front of us is one proposal. I also think that there, I don't want to form another work group, we don't have to do this today, but there could be some work done to say what other funding streams, what else could we do to create a reliable funding stream? Should a portion of building permit fees, maybe a fixed percent, go in to fund this fund? I don't know. And I'm not suggesting that per se.
No, I
But
think-
there are things that could be on the table.
But I think there has not been that discussion in earnest. And it would behoove us to have that discussion in earnest with your leadership or, with any kind of input from this particular committee. I think we've got to have that and really have it seriously. For instance, we've had transactions. And when there were funds left over from, for instance, you got some funding from the state for a specific project, and X number of dollars was put aside for your due diligence issues. And there were some little bits of money here and there that was always left over. And we asked that that money go into this fund that we have on our books. And the Finance Commission shot it down and said, no, it's going to go into the general fund. And that's traditionally the way it's been. But if we can muster the conversation to take to the Board of Finance and say, look, this is not the way we think it should be done, go to the Board of Selectmen and argue that every year you should have a line item in there that says, just like you're going to put, I don't know if you call it a line item, you're going to put money for the Parks and Rec to take care of your facilities. You're going to put money in the such and such to take care of that and to take care of that. You have such a large investment in this town, in all this open space. It's a huge investment. It warrants a line item to take care of it, just like you said. So that's the best argument we can give. It's just that we've got to make the argument. And we have to have, you know, the gumption to do it, I guess, but just to fight for it. Glastonbury, I don't know what their, you know, whole budget makeup is, but they are consistent. They put money into their budget every year toward this fund, and it grows, and it grows, and it grows, and they've been doing it for a long time. We're late at the gate here to get a fund started. I was just trying to do some little math. For instance, if you were to consider what's before us today, how many houses? Let's say 50 houses sell in 1 year. And if you say 1% of the, let's take a $500,000 house, and you take 150, you have, that's exempt. You have 350,000 left. You do 1% of that, and it's $3,500, isn't it? That's, my head says that, but I didn't figure it out.
It goes in the fund that anybody spends on anything they feel like spending it
But the
on.
amount would be $3,500 per house. Now you're not going to, the town's not going to get that money right away. They're going to get what, well, I don't know how they get it, because the owner of the house, the buyer of the house, is going to be paying that in $100 increments over the 35-year loan.
You're assuming it would be amortized?
Pardon?
You're assuming it would be amortized as opposed to...
That's the way this particular
No, it's because
suggestion is written, that it be amortized over the years.
I thought that, I read it as it's paid at the time of conveyance,
Yes.
which means that $3,500, the day I sell my house,
All right.
boom, there it goes.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, so what I guess I'm getting at is, while we have this discussion, it would behoove us to say, what would it mean in dollars for the town of Simsbury if you had this particular, you know, this
Okay,
particular
so
method of
take
collecting?
your example, Helen, and keep going. 50 houses at $3,500 apiece, how much is that?
Let's do this, let's call it 160
That was
grand.
your example, I thought you had it all worked out.
I
but
said
that's
I had
part-
just done it in my head.
That certainly, I think, is for the discussion down the road, because then you're gonna have the
No, I
discussion.
want to know what the magnitude is. I think that's where Helen's going.
I'm sorry?
150,000?
160-something thousand.
Yeah, okay, so
A
I'm just
year.
saying,
But Helen, you subtracted 150 from the price of the house. That's not the way that goes.
Okay.
So we're talking
It's
about...
any house less than 150,000. Doesn't count. It's 1%
All
of
right.
the sale price of every property in Simsbury. You already have one town saying the other, it costs me more to live in Simsbury
Yeah.
than Avon.
Diane, I got the argument, and we're not, I don't think we're
Yeah.
debating that at the moment. So there's two things. I mean, there's this particular proposal, and we could send this committee's opinion to the Board of Selectmen in an advisory capacity. I'm also hearing some energy around wanting to create a sustainable revenue source to make sure we keep up our open space. Would it be, and I want this group's opinion and staff's opinion, would it be crazy to expand the scope of this already existing work group to look at a few recommendations?
I would prefer that we stay steady to the course as far as subcommittee work is concerned, is to update this program that we already have, because I think we might find in that exercise
Okay.
where this town really stands with how it feels about its open space holdings, and how we are willing to commit to, for instance, I have an opinion, and my opinion may not hold with anybody else in this committee, but my opinion would say, off the top of my head, that open space does not require as much money for stewardship as another committee like the Parks and Rec, because my philosophy is that you don't do anything to it that much. You just need a little bit of money, let's say, to keep it safe and to keep it accessible to the citizens that paid for it. So you've got to really look at the philosophy of how we feel about our open space first before we can commit to saying we need X number of dollars a year to help support our philosophy.
And actually-
Rather than say we need money, but you don't know how you want to spend it.
I think that was in one of the examples given by the people who are proposing this conveyance fee. The various towns decided they needed $25,000 for an invasive plant removal thing. And they charged far less than the 1% as a conveyance fee, so that they would get that money, which otherwise would have had to come out of the budget. And that's how they sort of approached it from that thing. How much money do we need to do the work we need to do?
And the issue,
We've never had these discussions before.
the issue I would have with this bill, though, is this really is somewhat deceptive, because in the title, in bold print, it's using the language to fund the purchase and stewardship of open space. But as we've recognized, when you go into the body, the word stewardship has been removed. So I would have trouble supporting this particular bill. I think the concept makes sense, so there's got to be, I'm supportive of some outside funding source that is going to be available on an ongoing basis, so that you don't just burden taxpayers with, okay, now we got to raid the general fund for 50 grand for, a particular project. But at the same token, it's got to have the right language in it.
That's right. And there's so much changing right now with everything that I hate to even say that which is the final version. But I agree with you that I don't think we need money for the acquisition as much as we do for the stewardship.
Well, what's the, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that it seems like the other decision that's already here is that the people financing the stewardship are not going to be the residents.
Right.
It's going to be the people who aren't around to say, no, I don't want that, except for the real estate agents who are anxious about creating another tax and affecting our competitiveness with other towns. So I think if there's an argument to be made that everybody should pay a little bit rather than just the new people coming in. But what I think, and this comes up in the zoning commission too, that I'm reluctant to reinvent the wheel. That what we don't normally have is insight as to what the surrounding towns are doing. So we don't know what mechanisms are commonly used and what the magnitude is. How much money are they trying to generate? What is their need? We're just sort of looking at each other, trying to offer opinions and insights from our own limited experience. But if we're concerned that we're not going to be competitive with the real estate prices in Avon and Granby and Farmington, we should ask what's going on in those towns to give us a framework to sort of have in the back of our minds to start to fashion what our discussion, and maybe fast track our discussion a little bit. It gives you a better sense of what we're trying to do.
So I may, show my ignorance of state and local regulations and laws, but what's the significance of the state enacting this legislation?
So my understanding is that towns are quite limited in their ability to create new taxes, and we're heavily reliant on property taxes for funding our services and everything we need. So I think that's the thinking behind it. You would add anything, Maria?
Yes, that's a great summary.
This would
It's
allow
an
us to do
enabling,
it.
only
But
enabling.
there's nothing precluding us from creating a line item in the budget and putting it in the property tax.
Correct.
So I really don't see the
Yes, this is
relevance of
just
the
an-
state legislation.
This really gives any and every town the opportunity to design their own way of raising the funds, but this is an enabling statute, just to start the towns with, to get them, to give them
So if I
something.
understand correctly, a specific conveyance tax to achieve this is not possible with the current legislation.
That's right.
Okay, but like I said, there's nothing precluding the town budget from having a line item
No.
for stewardship.
We could do that.
So, I'm not in favor of it.
So The only reason we brought it up is because the way it was originally written is that if you didn't get your name in it, you wouldn't have that option in the future. And even if you had your name on it, you wouldn't necessarily have to do it. It would be up to the decision of the town, but it would spur a discussion among the town, which we have not had. And some people might find this so unpleasant that they would go for the line item in the budget.
The line item in the budget, general budget.
So what I heard Helen say a few minutes ago was that we should come up with the policies first, and then that would guide how much
I'm
money
just
we
saying,
need.
that discussion should happen, and then that will help formulate how we feel as a committee, and then it would go to the people, and then you can engage them and say, this is how we feel this should happen, and then you have a way within our own community to make it happen.
So I think that too, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make a comment that I just think this is a little bit, I'm glad that we're not forced to, jump in now, that we can jump in later, because I think it's just really premature while we're embarking on this open space master plan, and we might find ways to save money and figure out exactly what our issues are. I think it's premature because we're still kind of figuring this whole thing out, and I think we're on that path, and we should kind of stay on it.
In the letters that we wrote, we're not wedded to this piece of legislation, and as you can see, it's changing.
Yeah.
But we are wedded to having the discussion.
Yes, that's
Sure.
what I'm hearing. Yeah, so it sounds like that there is support for long-term having a sustainable source of revenue. Sounds from the discussion like now is not necessarily the time to be doing that.
Can I just ask one question? You just used the term outside source. What did you mean by that? That we should find an outside, did I hear correctly?
That we aren't just relying on the other tax dollars that already exist to fund the stewardship program. Because my thought is the town went and bought a lot of land and was supposed to take care of funding that stewardship, and they haven't. And so, to me, if they didn't do that under their current tax structure, I'd rather see some new way of funding that kind of stewardship rather than going back and now saying, okay, we're either going to cut other services or we're going to have to come up with higher property taxes in order to do that.
So what's new in your mind?
I think this would be new.
This
Something of this
statutory-
concept.
You mean
I'm not, again, I'm very
of a
flexible.
fee, of a
Correct.
fee.
Yep. Something of a fee, whether it's on a building permit, whether it's on a conveyance, but some new stream of revenue. Sure, is it another way to tax people? The answer is yes. And I don't have any particular feelings one way or another about how we do it. I just think the concept is a good one because we bought all that land, and we've had a number of years, and we've seen an unfunded line item that no one's even talking about. So we're stuck taking care of things, and generally I say we, Park and Rec, and and then Tom gets roasted on his budget because we're short in areas, and the fact is we're being asked to do more, and even now with less personnel and no dollars. So I'm all for find me the money, is basically what it comes down to.
So Maria, how would that work? I mean, if it was out of one of the existing fees, like the building permit fees, could that be allocated to something else, or how is it allocated currently?
Sure. Excuse me, so our building permit revenue, the local part of it, not the pieces that go to the state, just comes back into the general fund right now. So if we were to, let's say, I don't know, maybe allocate, $100,000 of building permit revenue to open space, we would essentially then have to raise the levy or make it up somewhere else, right?
The attractive thing about this concept is the lockbox idea, that
Yes.
this is very clear. It comes in, it's to be used for the intended purpose and cannot be rated.
Yes.
And that's again, a concept that I think, at least in general, that's a good idea.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so I just want to make sure that we've got the consensus of the committee. Stay the course on this policy, but this is something to watch for the future. Anybody who disagrees?
Oh, no,
Okay, no.
agreed.
All right, good. Any other discussion on this item? Thank you.
Eric, I'm not in favor of it. so,
Okay. No, thank you.
Okay, I don't think we can say it's unanimous.
No, no, I'm not suggesting, it's really about having some source of revenue that's reliable to pay for the things we bought. That's what
Okay.
that's
as
what I'm
opposed
saying
to
is
this
unanimous.
specific-
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, good. I just wanted to be clear
This
on that.
particular statute has come up every year for the last 14 years, maybe, and it's just gaining ground, inch by inch, especially by the towns that are mentioned here, that are the supporters. They are suggesting this, we've got to have this, because they need help. So it's just inch by inch gaining ground. I'm not expecting it to happen again this year, but at least it's making a little bit more opportunity for discussion.
If the Board of Selectmen, if there was serious momentum and wanting to move forward with it, I would definitely want a formal recommendation or not from this committee, so more to come. Oral reports, starting with the Parks and Rec Open Space Master Plan.
Sure, I can tell you that our committee of the Open Space Commission members and the Park and Rec Commission members and staff members, on January 30th, we interviewed four of the firms that submitted proposals. We had a great discussion that day. We have selected to move forward with Weston and Sampson, a consulting firm out of Rockingham. They're regional, but they have an office in Rockingham. We've currently received a draft contract from them. Maria and I are reviewing that draft contract, and we're also looking at some possible add-ons there, but they were under budget, under our proposed budget a little bit, so there is room that if we wanted, the proposal was missing something that one of our other ones did that we've asked them for some quotes on some possible add-ons, and we're kind of reviewing those right now through our budget process.
Okay. So I know one of the things that was discussed is with some of the pieces of open space, the possibility of hiring like a specialty consultant.
Yeah, they do. Their proposal did include a review of our open space with an ecologist. I think Marjorie and Susan were I think you guys are pleased with. They actually were part of the interview. That person was part of the interview process, and she did a nice job of presenting what she would do through the next summer, inventorying our open spaces, looking, kind of getting into the weeds, so to speak, and identifying some of our invasive species and stewardship practices, that kind of thing. So. Right.
Just one comment on that. I do know, if you remember on the Natural Biodiversity Database, there's a sharp line between Canton and Simsbury at Onion Mountain, because Canton had a full review of theirs. We've never had ours done. And so way back, I had contacted the person that had done the Canton side, and he said it would be he's a plant specialist, which may be different than the person that they have on staff. I think it would only be about $4,000 for him to do a really serious review of that. And
For all parcels?
No, just for the Onion Mountain Trap Rock Ridge. And the Trap Rock Ridge is an imperiled habitat in Connecticut, and it might be worth it to get, add our piece onto that thing. And that is the only Trap Rock Ridge in Connecticut that doesn't have a trail that runs along the spine, which means there's a lot of intact plant species up there that are trampled in other areas. So that would be my suggestion, if there's a possible add-on, is get that person who's already, the expert in the state and submitted so many species for Canton, might be willing to take a close look at Simsbury.
Any other questions? Great. Well, Susan and Marjorie, thanks for serving on that
And Dave
part of this
also.
process. Oh, I'm sorry, and Dave.
That's all right.
You wear many hats, Dave.
Got a big head.
Watch it, Ellen.
All right, policies and procedures work group.
Yeah, I can take this one, Eric. So
Okay.
I just want to thank everybody here for their patience. I think I had mentioned at the last meeting that the planning department right now is in staffing transition. Mike was promoted in the early fall. Robin was just recently then promoted to assistant town planner, so we have been looking to now fill our co-compliance officer position. We have been doing the recruitment for that position, and we do have a preferred candidate identified. Mike has selected a preferred candidate. The last sort of stop in the process was for that person to do a final interview with me, and if I support the recommendation, we'll be making a job offer. So again, our hope, as we're talking about this with Tom and with Mike, is that we think it would make sense probably for some combination of Robin and our co-compliance officer to support the work of this work group. We recently updated their job descriptions to include supporting things such as this, supporting work around our agricultural land, supporting work around our open space, helping with land management. And so that was a new job task that we assigned to those two positions, and thought that this would be a really good opportunity for those people to sort of meet you all, to work with the work group. But we want to get the person here. And so we're hoping that that person, again, if all goes well, we make an offer and they accept it, would probably be here by early April. So hopefully sometime next month we can get the work of this work group started for you all.
Good. And lastly, the Belden Forest Old Growth Forest designation application. Helen?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Just what you said.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I should turn to.
It is officially submitted. I really wanted to thank Susan for her help in helping to get the application ready. Also, Tom and Mike were very helpful in the work of that application, and we were able to officially submit it today. So,
Awesome.
Yep, I think they just need to kind of review it, and then we'll do the final signatures. And I had been in touch with Joan Maloof, the executive director, and she's willing to come to town for the designation event. We've kind of tagged like mid-October as a possible time, so I don't know, I'll put out some possible dates. And also, this is related enough to this agenda item that maybe I can bring it up. But there's an old growth forest documentary that was launched last year called The Lost Forests of New England, and it has a lot of filming done in Massachusetts, I think a little bit in Connecticut, and a number of experts are in the film, including people from Harvard Forest and Joan Maloof and Bob Leverett, who measured the Pinchot sycamore and came and gave a talk here. And we are going to have the Connecticut premiere of that film at Cine Studio at Trinity's campus on March 28th. So it's free, and there'll be an expert panel, and it should be really good. And there's going to be a book giveaway, actually, on a book about hemlocks.
How are you going to advertise that in Simsbury?
I don't know. Maybe I'll tell Eric to put it in his...
I was going to say. What a segue, Helen.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to
Yes,
announce
please send
that?
me the
Super.
details.
Great, thank you.
That's great. Okay, anything else on this agenda item?
The movie?
Thank you, Susan, for your leadership on this.
Thank you. I'm
Is there
excited.
a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Susan, what's the name of that film?
It's called The Lost
Get to this swim season.